Welcome to the REHolistic Physio podcast. Here we're going to try and find out the whys in order to work on the hows. Everything that's covered in the podcast is based on current evidence and up-to-date information on each topic. Please seek advice from your GP or healthcare practitioner before carrying out any of the advice that you hear on the podcast. So today, hello, Julian Baker. We have you this morning to talk to. I'm going to pick your brains about several things.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a bit about yourself, Julian? Sorry?
Very, very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invite.
You're very welcome, Julian.
We've
had a great conversation.
Well, I'm a chef originally. That was my starting point. So and then I went into manual therapy. I think chefing was my training for manual therapy. Because, you know, when you cook, you feel changes underneath your hands. You know, you cook a sauce out, you can feel it, whether it's lumpy or not. Trimming meat up, and I'll get onto that in a minute. And then I sort of got into manual therapy because I had an injury as a younger boy in martial arts, got thrown, so I had a neck injury, and so I went through the whole gamut of of various types of therapy, hands-on, chiropractic, osteopathic, got cracked, got massage, got poked, got prodded for years and years, and none of it was really getting me very far. And so I was living in Australia in my 20s, and somebody was rolfing me. They were practicing learning to rolf and killing me. It was, you know, I just screamed my way through the sessions, and it wasn't helping my neck at all. In fact, if anything, it was making it worse. And then one of these days, my neck went as it usually did every sort of 6 or 8 weeks, and I couldn't move. I'd be sitting in a car, and what I call the Japanese gear change, where somebody changes the gear and everybody bows from the waist down, you know. And somebody gave me this treatment called Bowen, and I didn't think it was any good at all. I thought it was rubbish. And the next day, my neck pain had gone. So I was like, So I'd started already doing some reflexology and some massage, and I thought I should probably learn this. And cut a long story short, I did, brought it back to the UK in 1993 with a child. Don't know how that happened, but anyway. went left with a backpack, came back with a daughter.
Oh, no. Yeah.
And a very, very poor value exchange, I have to say. And no, I've got a grandchild now, so it's even better. And then started to bring Bowen back to the UK, but still, the anatomy that I was learning really wasn't telling me what I was doing. You know, it could tell me the bit. This was the shoulder, and these are the muscles of it, and these are the nerves of action. But if I saw somebody change or felt something change underneath my hands, it didn't really. I couldn't go to a book and say why.
Yeah.
If somebody put their foot forward and I saw their head move, what did that mean? And again, there was nothing else that was around. So in 2007, somebody showed me one of Gil Headley's videos, DVDs, about superficial fascia and the fatty layer that's on the outside of it, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. And it changed everything. So I thought, got to go and meet this man. So I went to San Francisco and did a dissection with him and did more, and then I started to host my own and hosted people like Tom Myers in dissection in London, and then brought Gil over and worked with Gil for 12 years and ran dissections in all the major medical schools around the UK and some around the world as well. And so that was really my introduction to fascia and connective tissue. And then I went and did a degree in health sciences to look at cell biology and some of the things that were surrounding that. So sort of getting into it a little bit more. And that's what I've been doing, is teaching Bowen, and not just Bowen, but expanding into body work and manual and movement therapy. So that's really what I'm interested in, is the body as a whole unit. Why anatomy is complete garbage in terms of, you know, anatomy is not function. So I do that. And also, you know, telling the fascia people why you can't release fascia. So no,
controversial.
I feel like a Millwall supporter. Everybody hates me. We don't care.
We'll have to touch on that another time, I think, because that's quite interesting. I'd quite like to know more myself about that.
There's a lot of my quest, if you like, Heather, is to say, when we put our hands on people, what do we think we do? What are we doing? And nobody really knows. We just don't know. So that's really been my pick.
No, I love it. No, honestly, I mean, you know, I'm a fan. So but yeah, I'll pick your brains on some of the stuff another time anyway.
Yeah, so I do a lot of videos. I do a lot of stuff on you know, understanding what's happening and what changes can happen in our bodies when we move it and walk it.
Yeah. So important. And I think that's why one of the reasons why I really asked you on, to be honest, was because I'd obviously listened to you in lockdown. It was part of my routine was to, like, every Wednesday, was it? Was it Wednesday night or something you used to do? I mean, so long ago now. And it was, you literally put them on there, didn't you? You had different guests on for like an hour or two. And I used to be like, every Wednesday, put it on. And that's where I kind of came around you about you. And I thought, yeah, I kept you in mind all this time. And I think it's just really important. Like, as I say, my whole approach to this is I've got quite a holistic approach, I like to think, to therapy anyway myself, having come from a background of sort of more neurology initially, but also now a bit more rehab and musculoskeletal conditions. But in terms of, like, we're trying to find out the whys in order to change the how. So I think it's really important for people to understand it at a level, like we've had this discussion before. It's a slightly different from a clinician point of view, because I think I'd pick your brains in an entirely different way. To be honest, off camera and off recording, it would be really sort of different. But I think, sorry,
but get geeky.
Yeah, like, I really love it. So it's kind of, I'm quite passionate about learning it all myself. So I'm not going to say I know any of this, guys. I don't know it to this degree, but we just want to try and sort of teach really anyone out there why it's so important to try and change some habits that we might have got into, or try and really understand why things happen. And so one of the topics we've chosen today really to talk about is the strengths, isn't it? And tissue changes as we age. So we've had a podcast already released that's talked about strength, and then what to do just to keep mobile and active, and work on your balance and things like that. I'm going to go into a bit more detail about stuff like that a bit later on in another podcast. But in terms of sort of, I wanted to talk about today sort of this loss of muscle mass and therefore strength and function, which we sort of term sarcopenia. Now, also sort of like the age-related changes. So we've already talked about some of the endocrine systems in the body, but we know there's a lot of reasons why things change and happen. Sometimes you don't know the actual answer specifically. I know that. So sometimes we're not going to know exactly, or say exactly why all the time. But sort of from your experience then, Julian, like, when do you see the difference in when people age and different tissue when you age? Do you see that when you specifically look at different sort of people and bodies, should we say?
I think we see it from the experience of everybody around us.
Yeah.
To raise something that's really, really important, I think that tends to get missed in a lot of the questions and the conversations that we have, is that the Buddha taught that the Four Noble Truths, which was birth, aging, sickness, and death, and we all experience those four. There's no way from it. Yeah. So the process of aging is multifaceted. There isn't a single thing that you could say that is the process of aging, because it starts from the moment we draw breath.
Yeah.
The single link to that, if you want to get into the chemistry of it, is oxygenation. Oxygen is a horrible gas in terms of how destructive it is. It's the most destructive gas that we have. And if you take a bit of dynamite and try and blow it up in a vacuum, you get a little sputter. Put the same amount of oxygen into it as the weight of it, and suddenly you get an explosion. So it's a very destructive process. And the process of oxygenation is that process that we understand when an apple goes brown, or banana changes, and so on and so forth. And that's what's happening to our body. But what I want to remind is the single word that we have to keep in mind through all of this, and that is function.
Yeah.
Word that tends to get lost really, really easily, and I think that's a shame, because ultimately aging is neither here nor there. Don't worry about it. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
No, don't worry about, there's the aspect of our skin gets a bit saggier, and we get a bit jowly, and we look in the mirror and we got some wrinkles and stuff like that, and we can understand the biochemical process of that, and the oxygenation of that, and the loss of elastin, and so on and so forth. But the thing that is most concerning in relation to aging isn't necessarily the loss of muscle mass or bone density, is the loss of function. That's really the issue.
Yeah.
That you can lose all your muscle but still maintain function. So that's really the focus. And I think that there's some other aspects in relation to elastin and things, particularly when we get into the cardiovascular system that
Yeah.
to be considered. But function is one of those things that I keep on about all the time, function. And then we can say, well, what does function mean? And then we can have a conversation about the appropriate function, because that's going to change, from the age of 7 to the age of 97.
It's just going to stop. It just reduces from the moment you're born, like you're basically saying, aren't you?
It changes, and I
changes.
Yeah, and I'm a great stickler for language. I'm a great stickler for saying to students, they say, "Oh, this happens," or they make a statement of fact. And if you've ever sat, in Google Scholar, or you've ever sat in an academic library, and you go through the papers, and nobody reads a paper. Let's face it, we all read the abstract and jump to the conclusions, right?
I'm not going to agree with that.
Well, maybe we look at a couple of pictures if they're relevant. But generally speaking, unless it's when we're a hurry, we go, right. What's the title? What's the abstract? We jump through a few references, and you can't sit and read all this stuff. It's great.
No, you're right.
But generally speaking, a good abstract will tell you if any, and everybody, you should try it. Everybody's got it. You go into Google, and up on there's a little hat, and it says Google Scholar, and just type in anything. Type in dwarf throwing in Holland, and you'll find that there's an academic paper on it. So if you want to find something, and click on that, and at the front of that is an abstract, and I teach people how to read a paper sometimes. And a good abstract should tell you everything, because it should say, what we're trying to find, what were the reasons for it, what did we do, what were our methods, and what were our conclusions. So everything should be in that first paragraph, and it shouldn't be more than about 300 words long. And so an abstract will tell us that nothing in these papers is ever demonstrably fact, that it's saying this is what we found given the limitations of what we were doing, and this is what we think it might imply. So there's very, very, very few facts. And then when we get into science is rubbish at telling us what life is like. It's lack of evidence is not the same as evidence of lack. And science is a really blunt tool to sort of start to carve up reality. DNA is just soup. It's just a sort of chemical soup that tells us how big our nose is going to be, and whether we can wiggle our ears. Doesn't tell us whether I'm Stephen and I like rubber, or whether I think spinach is horrible. It does tell us whether we don't like coriander, though.
Okay. Now I'm intrigued, but I might ask you.
There is a genetic twist in coriander liking.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you that after. Remind me, unless everyone wants to know. But so in terms of then function, so you're talking about it's more the reduction in function that we're worried about, or we want to look at.
Again, change in function. Remember,
change in function. Okay, we're not going to say reduction. Okay, my misterminology there. So the reduction in function. So then, what are we going to link that to then? What? What was that?
Change in function, not reduction.
Change of, oh my gosh, start again.
The point is though, Heather, is that when we say reduction, the assumption is always going to be that it's going to be less. It's going to be worse. You can get people that took up ballroom dancing at the age of 50, and suddenly they're Olympic champions at the age of 60.
Changes.
So always impute reduction. It's going to get worse, because it could just as easily get better.
Get better. Okay. So we're going to work on that, because that's the principle we're trying to work on, is trying to help people to maintain, if not get better. So this is the thing. So what do we need to look at then? So what is happening then? How do we do this?
I think the first thing is there's a massive assumption that we've got old because of the aging process. That's not the case.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
There is no. Let's get something really, really clear. There is nothing unhealthy about being old. We talk about an aging population. We talk about it costing more. A healthy older person is going to cost less to the NHS and our health system than an unhealthy 45-year-old.
Yeah.
So
with you. Yeah.
The principle of health is not about how old you are. Your Q risk, your Q3 risk is predicated on your age. My mother is 92, and she's like, I mean, I don't take this the wrong way, but she's like, when you see post-nuclear, the only things that are going to live are crocodiles and cockroaches and my mother. You know, she, she's 92, and she had a fall last year. We're not talking about
Oh, yeah,
sort of frail elderly old lady fall. She was up a
yeah.
ladder trying to close a window, fell off and smashed her face on the sink.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
so this is somebody that is robust. Now she
yeah,
complains about, oh, my knees hurt and stuff like that. Well, she's a
yeah,
little bit overweight and stuff, but her function is absolutely remarkable.
yeah,
And the reason being is because she's always assumed that she's indestructible,
yeah,
and therefore she kind of is.
yeah,
So the function for her, and I keep saying to her, do not go to the doctor, because the doctor now wants to change her blood pressure medication because her
yes,
blood pressure is a bit high.
yeah,
Well, she's at risk of cardiovascular disease. Well, she's 90 bloody two. Every day she gets out of bed and she's not dead is a day that she's at more risk of cardiovascular disease. And if at the age of 92,
yeah,
the stroke or the heart attack was going to get her, it would have got her by now. So when we start to go in to look at the papers, what we see is that high blood pressure in the very elderly, of which there's very little research around yet because we haven't really studied them very much.
mm.
High blood pressure in the age of, say, people over the age of 92 has a protective effect, not a imaging.
Okay.
Yeah, you see. So once you get into that, and so there's all these things that when you start to study it, like I've got a client with,
Ah,
um,
interesting.
so it's got very high LDL count on
Yeah,
cholesterol. So the
yeah,
high low density lipoprotein, that's a bad
yeah,
lipoprotein.
yeah,
But the number that's missing out here, and this is a woman in her 60s, that she's freaking out because the doctor's saying, well, you've got to go on statins. It's like, I'm not saying you're not,
yeah,
saying let's apply the science here. So we go in and we look at the level, which is the triglycerides. Now, the triglycerides are a type of fat, like, cholesterol, which is a type of fat. And the triglycerides are a type of fat which give you the energy. They are the energy givers of the body. Now, if your triglyceride levels are high, that's a problem, because those are the things that are going to stick around in your system, providing you with energy. And they're going to give you the sclerotic arteries.
yes.
However, if your triglyceride level is, below 1.7, 1.5,
Mm.
1.6, like that, but your LDL is high, then you need to look at something else. Now, in this case, this woman, she's 65, never smoked, no history of heart disease in the family, not a drinker, exercises 5 to 6 hours a week with a dog, none of the other markers involved, vegetarian, eats a fairly high diet in monounsaturated fats. So these are olive oils and stuff like that. So then when you start to look into the research a bit deeper, and I said, really suggest you don't, but really,
Wise words there.
God, this stuff is so dull. It really is so
Just stop
boring.
me from having to read for hours on end. Okay, I won't.
No, and yeah, and you've got to read, endless.
Yeah,
Bear in mind that somebody's written this paper and it's taken them a year, and they're
so
really
yeah,
they're really into it, and they're going to
yeah,
tell you everything about it. But the bottom line is this: is that low density lipoprotein, which is the bad cholesterol,
yeah.
there's two types of fat globule within there. There's the small density lipoprotein, and that's the bad stuff. And then
Mm-hmm.
you've got the stuff that's a bit bigger, the bigger globular stuff. And that is always going to be raised with a diet that has high levels of monounsaturated fats. So a high triglyceride level, a low triglyceride level, and a higher LDL, and you'll see it in your blood counts,
Mm.
and ask the doctor to show that your total blood serum levels, your LDL will be listed. So a high LDL and a low triglyceride will probably mean that you've got greater quantities of the large globules of LDL rather than small globules. Don't worry about it. In which case,
Mm.
LDL is not a figure you need to worry about because of the triglyceride level. And so in this instance, does she need to take the statins? Look, I'm not going to change her meditation. I'm not going to change her medication, but I
Yeah,
would say to her, it's not. If I was it, and I have this conversation
yeah,
with me and presenting with the data, they haven't
yeah,
got time to look at it. So
yeah,
we've got to be careful about guidelines
yeah,
that are presented to us, and things like your blood pressure's high. All right, well, what else is high? It's a number, or your BMI, which is a horrible figure, a horrible thing to. So once we've got all these things, well, you're overweight, you've got a history of heart disease in your family, you're still a smoker, you drink a little bit too much, you don't eat very much, and you take a low don't take much exercise. Now we need to worry because your internal aging mechanism is ramping up. Does that make sense?
yeah,
When we go back to function, what do
yeah,
we mean by function? If I'm 92 my mother's function is amazing.
Yeah.
For most people at the age of, 85, what do we need? We don't necessarily need to, we don't want to go to do CrossFit
Yeah.
anymore. And I said, I'm going to say this here now. Don't tell anyone. Don't do CrossFit. Don't do CrossFit. Why would you do that to your body?
And the reason for this,
Oh,
Julian, is there
anyway,
evidence to say you shouldn't?
so CrossFit. Anyway, but you're going to get hurt. But so
Yeah.
at 85, you probably don't want to go and do
No,
CrossFit. They
you're not going
probably
to go bad. Okay.
Okay. But
Yeah.
what you want is your function is you want to be able to go down the shops, you want to have your
Yep.
cat, you want to be able to stay at home, you want to be able to reach the
Yep.
the cups in the cupboard. You want to have the function that is required for you.
Yes.
That function is going to be different than if you're 35. And I'm going to say that the biggest, I haven't done a study on it, but I'm going to say the biggest upward curve in the aging process, particularly for men and possibly women as well, is probably going to be post the age of 35 to 40 when you've got young kids. And I think the reason that happens is because your whole world is focused on, you're not old, you're not worried about getting old. You haven't got time to do exercise necessarily, or sit down and meditate.
Yeah.
You close the door to go to the toilet and somebody's banging on it going, "Where's the pajamas, mum?"
I can vouch for this.
Yeah, 2 seconds without screaming in my face.
Did you take a video of me this morning on my school run? Is this what happened? Were you recording me?
You get all these people when their kids go missing, like, "They're a little angel." I saw you yesterday morning. You were screaming at them and running up the road in your pajamas and forgot that you had your slippers on. So,
and again,
there we go. So this is it. We're not focused on ourselves, and this is the process where our mentality changes. Not, and
you're
our
right
with it. Because
you're
when
right.
was the last time that you went, right, I'm going to go out for a run, or I'm going to go to a class, I'm going to do, sit down and meditate, I'm going to be careful about what I eat, rather than going, what am I going to eat? What's for tonight is what the kids haven't eaten in their tea while I picked at it with a glass of wine in my hand.
It's a really fair point, because actually we did mention that, and I have to mention the podcast by Sarah Armstrong, because it's really, she's really great lady, and we've said the same thing, like, you need to find things for you and be a bit selfish with them at this point in your life, because you need to find that one thing that you're going to get out for and say, that's my time to do it once, twice, 3 times a week. And I'm going to cook this, and I'm going to meal plan, and this is for me, this is for my family, it's to keep me functioning the best that I can do for as long as I can do,
It's easier said than done. It's very clear, but there's people listening to this going, well, you try doing it. And I get it, I get it. And so for men, I was out with a buddy of mine at the cricket the other night, and he's late 30s, coming up to 40, and he's probably 4 stone overweight, and he's kids around to football or what have you. I'm saying, this isn't gonna, in 10 years time, you are the youngest that you will ever be now.
Yes.
This is it. We tend to put stuff off. We tend to go tomorrow. So that aging is attitudinal as much as anything else. Or suddenly the kids are 15, and 16 anymore. They don't need you to run them around. They need you to give them time.
I'm with you.
And now what? Well, what do you do now? So you change that function, but I think that element starts, I know people who are veterans. I go to the climbing center and I see guys in their 70s climbing. Went skiing with a bunch this year, but so but also in their 80s and they're skiing like you wouldn't believe, and because they've done it and their function is there and their attitude is, I'm going to carry on doing it.
So I think that's a really good point, actually, to focus less on what actually happens then in terms of a cellular level, and a kind of, I think being a physio, I'm really into that for my own sort of personal sort of understandings at that level.
Don't worry about it.
You don't need to worry about it, because it's as long as you're doing something to keep yourself as good as you can do. And do you think then when people are older and maybe they are 92, like your mum, for instance, but they're just not at the same functional level as your mum, do you think some of that's due to either lifestyle factors? Some of it's obviously health factors that they've experienced at some point in life, but do you think some of it is to do with the attitude of feeling scared to fall and therefore maybe not moving? Do you think some of it might be a bit of that as well?
Let me give everybody that's listening an exercise. So you can stand up here now, and you can stand up in a normal stance and take your normal position, and take a step forward. All right. Now, mentally measure, if you haven't, your body, mentally measure how far you can take, maybe take 2 or 3 steps down a hallway or something. And now go back and stand in the same position. Now put your head forward, imitate
posture.
And the moment you bring your head forward, now take that same stride length, you'll find that your stride length, it's almost impossible to take the same stride length confidently. And so you narrow your stride length. And there's a really interesting study in a care home, I think it was in Ohio, and they had a lot of robotics around the place, and they measured stride length. And they could predict falls so accurately that when your stride length decreased by 5 centimeters, it predicted a fall. You will fall over in the next 3 weeks. Okay. Now, falling over for women is the one of the most dangerous things that you can do.
Yeah.
A broken hip in the United Kingdom, a broken hip. This is a scary statistic.
Yeah, I think I've heard this one that you're going to say.
A broken hip kills more women than breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and uterine cancer put together.
That is exactly. I could remember the statistic. I couldn't remember exactly what it was against. Yeah, no, that is absolutely just that's scary, isn't it?
When you look at women that fall over, so bone density decreases. We know the bone density decreases massively. Do you know the access mnemonic?
No.
So access for osteoporosis. Put me on the
spot now.
But the access mnemonic for osteoporosis is about the risk factors.
Okay.
Got it here now. The risk factors that are increased for osteoporosis. So it's
alcohol, right?
Corticosteroids, calcium. We're going to go with the American spelling for estrogen.
Yep.
Smoking,
yeah.
sedentary lifestyle.
Oh my gosh.
So these are the access factors. These are the factors that one or some or all of them significantly increase the risk factors for osteoporosis.
Okay. Can I just mention that again to anyone listening? So it's access. The mnemonic access is alcohol, corticosteroids, calcium, estrogen, smoking, and a sedentary lifestyle.
Yes. Now, corticosteroids can mean, steroids for immune system illness. It can mean steroids for even sort of low level steroids for shoulder pain or joint pain. Low calcium, and what people don't quite realize is that calcium's involved in muscle contraction. So when you contract your muscle at the end of the firing mechanism, there's a space called a synapse. In order for information to go across from one nerve to the other, it has to fire that information. And so there's a lot of calcium that's involved in keeping those synapses and that information going. And so that's more important as far as the body is concerned than anything else. So if your calcium is low, your available calcium is low, then it will grab calcium from elsewhere, such as the bones. And in order to keep those muscles firing. So you strip the body's going, well, we've got calcium here, so we'll take it.
So we can take it from there.
Great storage place of calcium. But it's months and months and months. And very quickly also,
yes, please.
A word in terms of calcium is that dairy is a relatively poor source of calcium. There's lots of
it's good to know.
Green grapes. Broccoli.
Yeah, I like those. Broccoli. Love it.
And stuff. Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to maybe venture through some of those.
I'm not going to get into nutrition. It's a nightmare.
No, it is. Yeah.
A few years ago, they started putting people on calcium supplements. Because the body needs to be able to absorb that. Then it's hard to get at. But the one that doesn't get talked about is vitamin K2. Now, I'm not going to get into it, but K2 is an absolute must.
We'll talk about that after because I know a little bit about K2 and calcium.
But don't worry about it. It's very cheap, very easy to get hold of. But sedentary lifestyle, smoking is a big one. Alcohol smoking. And of course, that's the thing. We get into that 40s, 50s. We go around, have a glass of wine. I used to, when my kids were little, used to see women would come in for treatments. and
Yeah.
drop off the kids, come in while they play, let's have a glass of wine.
I know.
Finish the half a glass of wine while you're cooking dinner. Husband comes in, what's for dinner? Oh, well, let's open another bottle of wine, gin and
Bottle of
tonic.
wine.
You know, you're on way more amounts of alcohol that you can imagine.
And I think it's important to say, really, if you can try and, maybe, and we touched on this again with my friend Sarah, but go for a walk instead. Catch up with your girlfriend. If you want to catch up with them, maybe go for a walk or do something a bit more adventurous, or, do an activity of some description rather than sitting down and having a glass of wine or a few wines somewhere, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like introduce some joint activity together, because it's actually quite good for your mental health as well to all get together and do something.
There's a really good program. It's around the country called Run Walk Talk. And Run Walk Talk, here it happens on Tuesdays.
Okay.
It's a program which is, some people go, I'm going to do the run. I think there's a 5K or something if you want to do that. And you can jump a little bit, walk a little bit, talk a little bit, chat.
Yeah, sounds great. That sounds really good.
At mental health more than anything else.
Nice. It sounds fabulous. Well, thanks so much for talking to me, Julian. I think we'll have to leave it there for now, but I know we've got
go one more.
One more, go on then.
If you want to change anything now, don't change your diet. Listen to Ultra Processed People. It's on Spotify. It's free. Chris Van Tulleken. It will change the way that you think about food.
Thank you, Julian.
Absolute pleasure.